There's a common meme which is propagated within this late-stage capitalist dystopia that we call society, in which each individual is known as a rational consumer, a person who is aware of their options and makes the most logical choices with respect to their consumption and behavioral habits that are the most in line with maximizing self-benefits and utility.
The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests.
If a good is overpriced, or say a restaurant gets a lot of bad reviews, consumers will vote with their wallets and go elsewhere to a different company or brand for their needs. In this way, firms in competition are incentivized to provide the best possible services for the lowest possible prices, because if they don't satisfy consumer demand in an efficient manner, or say the company engages in unethical behavior during the production process, they will inherently be outcompeted by their competitors who do satisfy consumer demand in an efficient and ethical way. And the reason why this is because people are rational consumers, and they consume in accordance to what is in their best interest. And so this rationale extends to the sphere of activism as well, or the notion that you can buy your way out of systematic societal problems such as climate change or factory farming. Israel is an apartheid settler colonial state that is slowly but surely wiping out the Palestinians. Consider buying a different brand of hummus not made by Israeli vendors. Meat and dairy industry abuse cattle and farm animals? Go vegan. Fossil fuel industry is driving climate change? Buy an electric car and consider walking more. Pay taxes to the US military-industrial complex? Just completely uproot your life and go live in a different country. In this way, a justification and/or narrative can be weaved that problem resolution on the scale of what is needed won't necessitate larger-scale, conscious and deliberate collective action on the part of the public, but that instead we just need to let the free market fix it, since over time, the market will just automatically self-correct itself and resolve these problems once enough rational consumers are given enough time and information to apply market signals to filter out these unwanted outcomes. Unfortunately, however, due to the incentive structure and antisocial psychology that is routinely enabled and reinforced by the system, a slew of unwanted social outcomes such as crime, poverty, war, climate change, fraud, and many other issues cannot and will not ever be resolved due to the market's inherent structural limitations. Why, you ask? Because capitalism isn't actually about meeting human need, it's about maximizing profit. And so under this system, the onus falls on the individual to virtue signal by changing their consumption habits so that they feel as though they're impacting anything when they're actually not. Just like classical economist Adam Smith once said, companies have much more incentive to deceive and to conspire against and manipulate the public than they do to serve the public. Quote, "The interests of the dealers, however, in any particular branch of trade and/or manufacturers, is always in some respects different from and even opposite to that of the public. To widen the market and to narrow the competition is always in the interest of the dealers. To widen the market may frequently be agreeable enough to the interests of the public, but to narrow the competition must always be against it, and can serve only to enable the dealers, by raising their profits above what they would naturally be, to levy, for their own benefit, an absurd tax upon the rest of their fellow citizens. It comes from an order of men whose interests is never exactly the same with that of the public, who have generally an interest to deceive and to even oppress the public, and who accordingly have, upon many occasions, both deceived and oppressed it." Unquote. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, page 200. And so there you have it. Capitalism isn't actually about meeting human need, as there is an infinite number of so-called wants that are manufactured and satisfied by the system, while at the same time, needs are frequently off the table for many. Just look at America's healthcare system. Single-payer healthcare would serve human need massively, and yet we don't have it. Instead, we're stuck with 40,000 people dying every single year due to lack of access to healthcare. These people aren't dying because the services aren't available, but because they don't have the money with which to afford said services. And no amount of rational consuming of health insurance will change this fact, because all of the companies have the exact same incentive to arbitrarily deny people care. Or how about higher learning? One can't possibly hope to achieve a middle-class lifestyle in an increasingly competitive job market without a college education. Why is it that no matter which college the consumer rationally chooses to go to, they're getting fleeced? Or how about public transport? Why do I need a car? Why can't I instead opt for a bus or a train? Or how about politics? Why is it that no matter which politicians are running for office that I can never vote for somebody who actually represents my interests as a working person? And so virtually all of the most meaningful choices with respect to things that actually matter and directly impact people are completely off the table, while on the other hand we can choose between 10,000 useless brands of shoes at a local shopping mall. And so therefore this is supposed to be freedom? In the face of these facts, is there any truth to this notion of the rational consumer? Are people really making individual free choice in a vacuum with no external influence at all? And if they are, does that by definition mean that all of the biggest and most successful companies never engage in morally bankrupt or socially destructive behavior and routinely produce the best possible goods at the lowest possible prices? The answer to all of the above hypothetical questions, unsurprisingly, is a gigantic no. For starters, your average consumer is not rational in the least bit and are usually only concerned with the here and the now. Due to the nature of our gas station microwave convenience culture, combined with the excessively long work weeks people have to work in order to make ends meet, many simply don't have the time or the patience to spend hours upon hours researching every single in-store product for the most ethical and optimal options when they go to the grocery store. When given the choice, people will choose convenience 9.5 times out of 10. Furthermore, in many instances, people don't want to know how the sausage is made. And as evidenced by the continued existence of the meat and dairy industry and the automobile market, even when people are aware of the impacts of their consumption habits on the environment and public health, again, people will choose convenience and instant gratification 9.5 times out of 10, either because they don't have the time or they simply do not care and just want their desires satisfied in the instant. Nowadays, people don't even have the patience to cook their own food, let alone spend hours researching their products, as many would rather go to the drive-thru of a fast food joint, sit in their car, order a Happy Meal, and have the food handed over to them directly. In fact, most food being served by these fast food chains and the grocery stores are deliberately designed to be addictive as well. Highly processed white sugar and high fructose corn syrup is imbued within all of the candy, food, and soft drinks commercially and readily available most of the time. And when one walks into a gas station, the first thing they'll find are shelves stocked to the brim, teeming with millions of different brands of potato chips, candy bars, and soft drinks without a single apple or carrot in sight. Fast food joints line our city streets galore, and no matter where one looks, it is much easier and cheaper and more convenient to eat from an abundance of addictive, unhealthy, unrefined, processed junk food as opposed to anything healthy or nutritious. Food nowadays, given the excessive sugar, or the excessive sodium, fat, and the crunch factor are all designed to take advantage of the reward mechanism in the brain and reinforce people's more destructive consumption habits and to keep them showing up and consuming, as all of this highly palatable food is not only fattening and addictive, it's also unsatiating as well. It's a lot easier for people to get filled up on apples and carrots versus getting filled up on ice cream or potato chips for this reason. And so given private companies' habit of deliberately taking advantage of people's impulsive lizard brain instincts in such a blatantly naked way, there's nothing rational about this at all. And yet right-wingers will still want to hone in on and blame individuals for the current state of affairs when individual consumers are not the ones responsible. The food industry is. Even when people do take the time to do research and tailor their consumption habits, nobody has access to perfect or symmetrical information most of the time. Companies have a direct incentive to lie and manipulate the data and skew the statistics either to present their products in the best light imaginable or to present the alternative as unviable or undesirable. Even in the era of the internet, there's no way that a person can possibly know everything and get all of the objective information that they need for the hundreds of individual products that they buy on a regular basis. Even if the vendor that you purchase chocolate through says on their package wrapping that this chocolate wasn't farmed by slaves in Africa, how can you be so certain? Companies are constantly lying on technicalities so that they can cut corners on operational costs. For example, Whenever you go to the grocery store and buy free-range branded eggs, the majority of the time, what is considered free range is loosely defined by law. And there are many instances where the so-called cage-free chicken that is laying those eggs is only cage-free for an hour per day, but then spends the other 23 hours crammed in a tightly packed cage. Or how about an instance where one were to buy a used car? The customer is told by the seller that it was well maintained and doesn't have any problems. They take the vehicle for a test run and everything seems to check out, so they purchase the vehicle. A week later, the car's real problems begin to manifest and they end up having to spend thousands of dollars in repairs. Can it be said that the consumer made a rational choice in this instance given the information available to them? Yes, but that doesn't stop the supplier from being incentivized to lie and give people a raw deal anyways. This very exact thing was done in the 1970s with the Ford Pintos, where the space between the bumper and the gas tank was poorly reinforced, so that upon collision in an accident the car would explode. And had they just put one cheap plastic block between the space, the car would have been safe to drive. But instead, Ford cut corners on a very basic safety mechanism, and then shortly thereafter it costed dozens of people their lives. Sure, nowadays cars are a great deal safer to drive than they used to be, but the fact of the matter is that companies are incentivized to cut corners as much as possible to the point to where fatal design flaws will only get fixed if the cost of the ensuing lawsuits is greater than the cost of fixing the vehicle. If the lawsuits are cheaper, on the other hand, then according to the free market's cost-cutting gaming strategy, without political pressure, the car will never be fixed and will continue to have the same dangerous lingering issues. Or how about planned obsolescence? A production practice by which goods are manufactured inferior on the spot with the nefarious intent of them breaking down so that people are forced to purchase repair services or to upgrade to the newer model. Apple is notorious for strategizing its planned obsolescence with their iPhones year by year. They throttle them, make them slow with the new updates, and design them in a deliberate fashion to be unrepairable so that consumers are forced to buy the new model. And it's not just Apple, Samsung does it too, and so too does most of their competitors. And it's not limited to smartphones either. And the gigantic mountains and seas of landfills full of old obsolete products and single-use packaging are my primary evidence of this phenomenon. Nothing's designed to last in this system. So how exactly is the consumer supposed to rationally consume their way out of such a systematic problem? And then there's the phenomenon of advertising. An industry centered around taking advantage of people's ignorance, insecurities, fear, irrational impulses, and primal psychology to sell them shit. Originally, the purpose of advertising was to demonstrate the utility of a product as to persuade consumers into purchasing it. Nowadays, it more so constitutes a vast campaign of mass psychosis, brainwashing, and psychological warfare as to manipulate the public into spending money that they don't have on things that they don't need, manufacturing wants out of thin air for useless brands and products. Hour by hour, day by day, week by week, all day every day, people are inundated with advertising. From ads on social media, to ads on billboards, to ads on radio, to television, to sign postings on the side of stoplight intersections. Everywhere you go, you see advertisements. And the volume of ads with which people are subjected to has increased steadily over the years. It has been estimated that in the year 2020, firms spent more than $225 billion on advertising, which comes out to be about $716 per person. That number is only expected to rise, too, as advertising has now grown to encompass the largest operational costs for the upkeep of big business. Over the decades, companies have hired psychologists, sociologists, and advertisers to come together and figure out what the right neurological triggers are that need to be pulled in order to get people to buy and consume an ever-growingly diverse variety and volume of mundane and useless products year by year. Some of the tricks which advertisers use to get people to consume more include featuring sexually attractive women on cheeseburger or car commercials, getting celebrity endorsements for specific product brands, playing on people's insecurities, inventing non-existent problems that only their goods can solve, and color branding. For example, the color red is often used in the logos of various fast food chains as to trigger people to eat out of a given place or purchase soft drinks. The color blue is utilized in the logos of tech brands and social media platforms who want consumers to associate them with trust and dependency and reliability. The color green is often associated with nature and environmentalism, which is often why it's rocked by companies like Starbucks and British Petroleum. Otherwise, most products and brands that people are compelled to shop for are utterly worthless and only exist for the purpose of getting people to spend money that they don't have on things that they don't need to solve problems that don't actually exist. Fidget spinners and bear paws immediately come to mind when one considers the sheer volume of worthless commodities that nobody has ever wanted or asked for. And so in the face of these facts, the notion of the rational consumer crumbles before our very eyes. Don't kid yourselves, viewer. The mythology of the rational consumer is little more than ideological justification for the present state of things and capitalist propaganda which seeks to place the blame on individual consumers for the actions of big business, placing the onus of resolving these issues on working people, and manipulating the public into thinking that the free market will fix all of the issues caused by the free market in the first place. But as we should all know by now, it doesn't. Learn to recognize the bullshit, viewer. Rise above, become a socialist, and start reading Lenin and Marx.